Hi everyone, I'm Lucy, speech and language therapist with Talking Lab, and I'm back with a new video after a really long break. I'm at home in isolation this week, so I thought it would be a good time to get back on social media. So I did a video way back with Silver showing you what we're looking for in terms of communication for an 18-month-old. And now she's coming up to 2 years, and I thought I'd show you what we're expecting for children at around 24 months. I'm hoping that lots of parents will find this helpful because I know that many people have had their 2-year health visitor checks either cancelled or postponed or moved to a phone or video call due to the coronavirus. So some people may be feeling a little bit lacking in support and guidance around whether their little one is on track, because again, we see huge variation in skills at this age, and the vast majority fall within the normal range, with just a few exceptions that we would want to look into. So the format will be exactly the same. I'm going to show you the kind of milestones that we generally see our 2-year-olds reaching at around this time. For most of them, if your child is not doing them yet, we wouldn't want you to worry. And there's just a tiny section at the end, which is if they're not doing these things yet, then it's a good idea to get in touch with a speech and language therapist. There's actually quite a lot to cover with this age, so apologies if this ends up being a really long video. Great, so first of all, we'll get cracking with play and social communication. And please don't worry too much if you're feeling really guilty that your child has been unable to access much interaction with other littlies at this time. We're all very much in the same boat in that regard. I'm definitely missing my toddler group and hanging out with other children, but our babies are extremely resilient, and the interaction skills that they're working on, just communicating with people in their bubbles, is enough. And when they're released back into the wild, they will be able to get on with other children. I promise you, you're not doing any lasting damage, so please don't worry. So for our 2-year-olds, we expect them to be playing contentedly, so happily near other children, but not usually with them yet. So we would be concerned if the mere presence of another child was distressing to your little one, but of course we don't expect them to be able to share or to be tolerant of another child taking their toy or taking an adult's attention away from them. These little ones are still usually relying on a lot of non-verbal means to communicate. So for example, pointing, using their facial expression to show you what they want, and getting frustrated if you haven't understood them. So we're not expecting that by this age they have fully evolved into just relying on the words that they use to communicate. So therefore, throwing tantrums is still very common as they're stuck in that awkward phase of having a lot that they want to communicate with you, but a relatively limited arsenal of tools to tell you. Around this age, we're hopeful that their pretend play is developing. So being able to act out familiar routines onto their toys, like holding food up to a doll or a teddy's mouth to pretend to feed them, or put them to bed, or playing with toy cars in a way that shows that they understand that the cars are driving around rather than just exploring those cars as a physical object to put in their mouth or to throw. So they understand that that toy car represents an object in the real world. We would expect these children to be joining in with songs and rhymes, but again, this isn't necessarily singing along, but certainly putting the actions in the right place or mimicking the sounds that go along to show that they remember and they're anticipating what's going to happen next.
The elephant sneezed and fell on its knees. And what became of the monkey, 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 monkey.
You may have also noticed that our 2-year-olds are developing their long-term memory and are recognising familiar stories. So when they were a little bit younger, they may have just enjoyed looking at the pictures in their storybooks, and now they may be able to tolerate a bit of plot and even have favourite parts in the story, but it's expected that they can't sit through long passages of text yet, so you're likely to see them trying to turn the page if you're lingering on one page for too long, so that's all very normal. So that's everything for play and social communication. Now we're talking about understanding or receptive language. So what are these children understanding of the words that we're actually saying to them? We are expecting our little ones to be understanding 200 plus words. So hopefully you've noticed them tuning in when you're talking about familiar family members. If you're talking to them about the foods they like, hopefully you've seen their eyes lighting up if you mention something like chocolate or a biscuit, or their favourite characters. And probably they're able to now pick out a lot of animals and objects if you ask them to point to them in books. We are expecting our 2-year-olds to be following lots of instructions in context, like put your arms up when you're helping them to get dressed, or wave bye to granny, or hold mummy's hand when you're walking. I talked in the last video about children being able to trick us into thinking that they can understand because they're very good at picking up on non-verbal cues. So if Silver and also my dog see me putting my coat on and getting my keys, they know that we're about to go out. So Silver has a pretty good idea that the next thing that happens in this routine is I'm going to go and ask her to get her shoes. So much so that if I gave her that command in Japanese, she probably would go and get her shoes. Not that I speak Japanese at all. So it's important to remember that just because these children can follow an instruction, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're understanding every word in that instruction, because they're very good at interpreting that context and understanding what we as adults want them to do. What I would therefore look for in a clinical setting is whether a child can reliably identify an object when I ask them without giving them any additional help. So if you watch this next clip, although you can't see me in the video, all I'm doing is holding and looking at the camera. So I'm not pointing or looking at the toys even, and Silver has to rely on correctly interpreting the words that she's hearing in order to get the answer right. So I'm making it really, really difficult for her. And obviously in a natural context, we don't do that. This is just to test her understanding. And it is really hard as a parent not to give that child any help as we usually would. So if you want to test their understanding, you really do have to sit on your hands to stop you from pointing to the toys and to give them that help. Where is the ball? Where's the ball? Good listening. There's the ball. You're so clever. Where's Teddy? Where's Teddy? Good listening. There's Teddy. Hello, Teddy. Where is the shoe? Good listening. There's the shoe. Around this age, we also see children starting to be able to follow instructions with 2 information carrying words without the help of the context or any pointing. So this shows how their memories are developing because they can hold and process that extra information in their heads. Silver, can you give Teddy a drink? Oh, good girl. Teddy's drinking. You're so clever. We also see children at this age starting to understand question words like what and where. So now on to expressive language, which is the words and the sentences that children are using for themselves. So by around 2 years old, we do really want our children to be saying around 50 words, which sounds like a lot, but actually they do add up quicker than you think. Also, we are looking for a bit of variety within those words as well. So mostly it's going to be nouns, which are object words. So mummy, daddy, dog, spoon, ball, fish. But we feel really happy if there are also some adjectives or describing words, for example, more or hot or big or scary. And also verbs, which are doing words or action words, for example, sleeping, drinking, and even got and go. Hairbrush. Hairbrush in the bag. Good talking. A duck. Duck in the bag. Okay. There's Teddy. What's Teddy doing? Teddy's sleeping, that's right.
Dog.
It's the dog.
Not play.
He's knocked the bin over, that's right. He's naughty.
Naughty.
Naughty dog. What we also tend to see happening between 2 and 2.5 is some really nice combining of words to make simple sentences. Now this is a super exciting milestone because they're showing us that they're not just remembering the names of things, they're actually demonstrating that they are starting to learn the incredibly complex rules of English or whatever language they are hearing, and having the confidence to generate their own sentences, which is amazing. So as I mentioned in the 18-month video, you want to be careful that it is a genuine constructed sentence. So for example, we don't tend to count things like all gone and oh dear, because although they're made up of 2 words, these words tend to always occur together. And so they hear them as a single chunk and they treat these phrases as a single word. But the early word combinations we do tend to see might be using the words more, or high, or big, or an absolute toddler fave, no. So if your child is using one of those words in a combination, you can feel pretty confident that they're getting the concept of generating sentences.
Where's
Where's the stone?
You're coming.
the come?
Do you want to get in then?
You might even find that these children start adding on another idea to create sentences of 3 words. You found it.
No, touch it.
What's also very typical at this age is for children to have fully grasped the concept of their own name, and they tend to use this to refer to themselves in the 3rd person.
Go Silver, yeah.
Just a quick word here on bilingualism and multilingualism. So if children are being exposed to multiple languages, we expect them to be hitting those milestones in at least one of those languages. So if a child is hearing 2 languages at home, but only saying words in one language, that's absolutely fine. If they have around 25 words in each language, then they've hit their collective target of 50 words, so that's also fine. But if they're not yet using any words in any of the languages that they're hearing at home, then we would be looking for a reason behind that, because it's not possible for multilingualism or bilingualism to cause a language delay. So that covers what we expect our 2-year-olds to be saying, and now we'll come on to how they're saying those words. So by that we're talking about the speech sounds, so the individual sounds within each word. We are expecting our 2-year-olds to need a lot of translation, so only really beginning to be understood by unfamiliar adults rather than the people who spend a lot of time with them. They're still relying quite heavily on those sounds that we make at the front of the mouth, so with your lips and your tongue just behind your teeth. So for example, m, n, t, d, b. And it's unlikely that they've figured out those back sounds yet, the ones that we make at the back of the mouth, like k and g. It's also likely that these children will be missing the sounds off the ends of words, and they won't have yet mastered the art of blending consonants, which is where 2 consonant sounds occur together, like the SP, the sp in spoon, or the GR, the gr in green. So for Silver, she tends to use the F sound in words that start with an S blend. So if instead of saying smoothie, she'll say foovie, and instead of swing, she'll say thing. So remembering that rule helps me to figure out what she's saying if she's using a word that starts with F. And I know it's really tempting as parents to assimilate your toddler's adorable words into your everyday language at home, but it really is much better for their speech and language development if you continue to model the correct pronunciation.
Mice.
No, not right.
Who is it then?
Not right.
Not mite. Not mice. I can see mice in the slipper.
If you are a signer, then first of all, yay and well done. And secondly, please continue to sign with your little one, even though they're now talking, as it's definitely a use it or lose it skill. And it can really help them to get that message across when they haven't yet mastered the pronunciation of a word. So I remember a couple of weeks ago, Silver was eating a strawberry and she kept telling me, told over and over again and really insistently, and I just couldn't figure out what she was saying. I was like, told, you told me something? And she literally put down the spoon that she was holding, basically rolled her eyes at me and signed cold. And I was like, oh, cold, okay. So thank goodness for sign, because I really wouldn't have figured out that one without her signing. Another thing I want to mention really briefly is if you notice your child is talking with a traditional lisp. So that's if their tongue is poking between their teeth for the S sound, so it sounds like TH, like sausages instead of sausages. This is definitely not something to worry about. They're highly likely to just grow out of it. It doesn't affect how much they can be understood by others. And the only time I would ever worry about a lisp is if the lisping person themselves were bothered by it. So as soon as there's any motivation for that person to fix their own lisp, then it's a really easy fix, no matter what age they are. You might have seen on a previous video, I talked about changing my own speech patterns when I was 21 years old. So it's definitely not a case of you have to do it by a certain age or you're stuck with it forever. That's absolutely not the case. So please don't worry about lisps. So those are the milestones that we expect children to be reaching at around the age of 2 and between 2 and 2.5. Now, as I mentioned before, there is a lot of variation at this age, and there are only a few things that we would look out for that would cause us some concern, and we would advise looking into them further. The first thing to be aware of is to keep checking in with your 2-year-old's hearing. So just keep an eye out if your child has frequent colds or ear infections or appears not to hear you. But I know at this age it's really hard to know whether that's a hearing difficulty or whether it's just selective ignoring, really. The next thing to be aware of is your child's social communication. So we know that they probably don't understand how to play with other children at this age, but we still want them to see children as interesting and to be curious, to at least look at them and notice if other children are around. At this age, they are highly social beings, so we want them to be constantly, dare I say it, annoying you. So wanting to play with you, bringing you things, pointing, demanding, insisting that you engage with them. So not being too happy about being ignored unless you've stuck on Frozen for them. Guilty. So signs that I would look out for, that I would be concerned about, would be if a parent said things like, at the playground, they just run over to the slide and they don't seem to notice whether other children are there or not. It's like they don't even see them. Or she just plays with her toys for ages. She loves her bricks and her noisy toys. She'll hold them up and watch the lights and moving parts. And if I try to play with her, she'll just walk away. Or maybe when he wants something, he will just scream and cry. He won't point to what he wants or take me over. I just have to try and figure out what he wants. So things like that would make me wonder about their social communication. One thing that you might have noticed is that our 2-year-olds do like to indulge in a lot of repetition. So they like hearing the same songs, they'll choose the same stories, they'll insist on the same films, and they'll create little repetitive games, like putting all the toys on the edge of the bath and then tipping them all into the water and then taking them out and doing it over again. So this can strike us as parents as quite unusual, especially those of us with experience with autism. We might think, oh my God, this is autistic behaviour. But although they can seem quite intent on repeating that pattern, there are subtle differences to the kind of things that we see in autism. So these repetitive patterns, these typical ones, are known as schemas. And basically what your child is doing is just categorizing and sorting new information in their head and learning what happens when they carry out a series of actions. So they're repeating that pattern to check that the same thing happens each time, like a proper little scientist, and so that they can commit these feelings and experiences to their long-term memory. So the only time we would be worried about these repetitive behaviours is if they would not allow you to sabotage that play. So if they became really upset and inconsolable, if you tried to stop them, or if that individual repetitive play and behaviour was their only or main form of play. So as long as they're doing these repetitive behaviours sometimes, but interspersed with lots of other different types of play, so interactive play, enjoying unpredictable experiences, doing pretend play, engaging with others, enjoying new stories and new activities, then there's absolutely nothing to worry about the odd schema coming out in their play. In terms of receptive language or understanding, the only children that I would be worried about are the ones who couldn't reliably select the items that you name to show you that they understand. Now, it is sometimes easy as parents to convince ourselves, I think they know what I'm saying, but they're just not keen to perform in that formal situation. So it's more just like they're not concentrating type thing. But what I do find in my experience is that when you're asking a child to do something that's well within their capability, and you're offering something like praise and attention, then that child is generally pretty keen to show off their skills, that they can do it. It's an almost irresistible urge that we have even as adults. That's why we love watching quiz shows and shouting out the right answer, especially if we're with someone else. We get a real kick out of demonstrating that we know something and reassuring ourselves that we know something. So generally speaking, if a child isn't willing to show me that they can understand these words, ball, duck, teddy, I'm always fairly suspicious that the reason is that they're not actually confident at understanding what those words mean. I will add in a but here though. So for example, if a child was actually able to talk and get their message across to others through words, but they weren't willing to attend to that receptive language part of the assessment, I probably wouldn't worry, because the fact that they can actually talk and construct sentences is enough evidence that they can understand the words, because understanding is essential in order for functional communication to take place. So the final reason why I would want to assess a 2-year-old's communication further is if they were not yet attempting to name some familiar items. So by that I mean a child who is not yet saying anything at 2 years old, not even a handful of words that can only be recognised by their parents as consistent words. So if I saw a 2-year-old who isn't yet combining words but is consistently saying, say, D for dog, adder for daddy, gugger for bottle, and a few more like that, even though those words sound nothing like the adult version, I'm probably not going to worry. But if the child is making some sounds, but the parents haven't been able to recognise any consistent sound patterns to indicate words, that would make me question what was going on. So if you're still with me, hello, and thank you for getting to the end. So to sum up, I hope that most of you are now feeling a bit more reassured that your 2-year-old is on track with their communication, or is at least within the limits of the normal range. But if you are concerned about one of these 4 things, then you might want to consider seeking some support. So 1 is hearing, especially for those little ones prone to colds and ear infections. If you're worried, just ask your GP to check their ears. 2, social communication. If your 2-year-old is not fairly constantly demanding your attention, or if they are distressed by or apparently oblivious to the presence of other children. 3, receptive language. So if you don't have any solid evidence that your child can understand the words that you are saying outside of a usual routine. And 4, talking. If your child is not yet attempting to say at least a handful of words that you as their parent can recognise as meaningful. So if you are concerned, you do have options for support. There are, of course, our excellent NHS colleagues. They're out there, they're fighting the good fight, doing their best in these crazy times. But an NHS therapist has to be extra careful because they come into contact with a lot more people in a week than your average independent therapist. So that's why they're having to drastically change their service for the time being. And there is likely to be a wait. If you're not sure how to refer to the NHS, then get in touch and I can help you with that. If you would like to have a chat with me, then please do. You can send me an email or just call and I'll answer if I can. You can hop onto my website and book a free phone consultation at a time that suits you. I don't have a waiting list, and please remember the 6-person limit that's currently in force due to the coronavirus does not apply to speech and language therapy services. So you can still have a face-to-face appointment if you want, even if you already have 6 or more people living in your house. And I'm still offering online assessments via Zoom as well, if you're isolating or if you would prefer to minimise the risk. Okay, I think that's enough of me talking now. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and share my videos, and I will be back soon with some exciting new content. So bye for now.